I used to believe love and connection were things for younger people, things that had passed me by. But last spring, everything changed. Let me tell you how it happened. How I found myself seen again, even when I thought I was invisible. I'm 52 years old, and for most of my life, I've played it safe. Love came and went quietly, like a breeze I never dared to chase. I raised my daughter on my own, worked hard, and lived in a little house that always smelled like lavender and strong coffee. I used to think people like me didn't have stories worth telling. But something happened last spring, something I still have trouble saying out loud. I never thought anything like this could happen to me. Please don't make the same mistake I did. It started on one of those sticky Saturday afternoons in early May. I remember because the breeze through the bathroom window felt like warm breath against my damp skin. I had just stepped out of the shower, wrapped in my worn, oversized robe, the fluffy blue one with the threadbare sleeve, and the house was quiet, or at least I thought it was. I was staying at my cousin Lisa's place for the week while she and her husband were in Florida. She'd asked me to keep an eye on the house and help out with her 22-year-old son, Jake, while he recovered from knee surgery. He was mostly independent, just a little unsteady, and needed help with errands and getting around. We weren't close. Jake had grown up fast, taller, quieter, with less to say every time I saw him, but I remembered him as the little boy who used to call me Aunt Maddie and leave sticky popsicle kisses on my cheeks. I hadn't seen him yet that morning. I figured he was still asleep, headphones on, lights dimmed like most young men, so I took my time in the shower, letting the water soothe the stiffness in my shoulders. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wasn't bracing for anything. That's why I didn't hear the footsteps right away. The bathroom door creaked open softly. So softly, I thought maybe it was the wind. I was leaning over the sink, dabbing lotion onto my neck, when I caught the movement in the mirror. I turned my head just enough to see him standing there. Jake. His eyes went wide the moment our gazes met, and he froze like a deer caught in headlights. For half a second, the room felt suspended in silence. He looked just as shocked as I felt. "Oh, God," he blurted, his voice cracking. He quickly turned away, hand on the door like he was about to flee. "Jake, wait." I didn't mean to shout, but the words came out before I could stop them. "I don't know why I said that," he mumbled, his back still turned. Maybe instinct, maybe panic, maybe something else. My heart was racing, but I wasn't angry. Not exactly. More confused, exposed, and strangely, so strangely seen. He turned back slowly, his face flushed red, his voice apologetic. "I thought you were downstairs," he said. "I just needed my brace. It's in the cabinet under the sink. I didn't think anyone was in here." I tightened the robe around my waist and took a slow breath. "It's okay. I should have locked the door. I'm sorry, too." We stood there for a moment, both of us looking anywhere but directly at each other. The tension was awkward, but not hostile. It buzzed faintly under the surface, unspoken and fragile. He stepped back inside, still avoiding my gaze. "I can get it," he started, but I cut him off. No, I'll grab it for you," I offered, kneeling to open the cabinet. My hands felt shaky, and I hated how self-conscious I was about my legs showing as I bent forward. I handed him the brace, and when I looked up, our faces were suddenly much closer than I expected. That's when it hit me. His eyes, so familiar, but different now. Not the boy I remembered. Not quite. There was a quiet softness in them, something that didn't belong to childhood anymore. He took the brace from my hand gently, his fingers brushing mine. Thanks," he said, his voice low. I nodded, but I didn't move away. Neither did he. "I remember when you used to chase me around the yard with a water hose," he added, a small smile tugging at his lips. "And you'd scream like a banshee," I replied, chuckling. "I thought you hated me back then." "I didn't," he said too quietly, and not even a little. The air between us thickened, but not in a dangerous way, in a way that made me feel noticed. That made me feel like maybe I hadn't faded into the background of everyone's life the way I thought I had. Finally, I stepped back and gave him room. "Let's get you set up with that brace," I said, trying to move things along, to shake off the strange moment that had passed between us. But as I helped him fasten the straps, our hands brushing again, I couldn't help but wonder, had something shifted between us in those few accidental seconds? Something had opened, a door I didn't even realize was there, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to close it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in Lisa's guest room, the ceiling fan whirring above me, my eyes tracing the slow dance of its blades. I kept replaying the moment in the bathroom. The look on Jake's face when he saw me, the tremble in his voice, the way his fingers lingered just a little longer than they had to. It was innocent, it had to be. But something about it kept needling at the edges of my mind. It wasn't just what happened, it was how I felt. Not embarrassed, not violated, not angry, but seen, noticed, desired even. And that realization brought with it a guilt I wasn't ready to name. The next morning, I busied myself in the kitchen, pouring cereal into a bowl and trying to act like everything was normal. I had thrown on a sweater, despite the warmth, to make sure I was covered from collarbone to hip. I didn't trust myself not to overthink it. Jake walked in, limping slightly, his hair tousled at his eyes, still soft with sleep. He looked at me, held the gaze for just a beat too long, then reached for a mug. "A morning," he said. "A morning," he said. "A morning. How's the knee?" He shrugged. A stiff, but better. I nodded, stirring my coffee. "Let me know if you want to do the exercises. I can help." He smiled faint. "You're better than the physical therapist." That pulled a small laugh out of me. I doubt that. He sat across from me at the small table by the window. "You've always been patient," he said. "Even when I was a pain." "I never thought of you as a pain," I replied. "You were just spirited." He tilted his head, studying me. "You always saw the good in people, didn't you?" I felt my cheeks flush. "I try." There was a long pause after that. He reached for his spoon, then set it back down. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said, not quite looking at me. I stiffened slightly. "It depends what it is. Why aren't you with anyone?" I blinked. The question caught me off guard. That's kind of out of the blue. He looked up then, his expression serious. "I just mean someone like you. Kind, warm, beautiful. It doesn't make sense to me. You deserve someone." My chest tightened. "That's kind of you to say, Jake, but relationships are complicated, and after a while you get used to being on your own." But do you want to be?" His voice was soft, careful. I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window, watching the breeze play with the leaves. I've learned to keep that part of me quiet. Life gets easier when you stop expecting too much. He let that sit for a moment, then said, "You shouldn't have to quiet yourself. You still have so much to give." His words, so simple, cut deeper than he could have known. But maybe it was just the way he said it, or the look in his eyes, but I felt something shift in me. Something I thought I had buried long ago. Later that day, I helped him through his stretching routine. He winced and cursed a few times, and I teased him about his lack of flexibility. At one point, I held his foot steady as he lay back on the mat, breathing through the pain. "You're stronger than you think," I told him, resting my hand on his ankle. He opened his eyes and looked up at me. "So are you." I swallowed hard and smiled down at him, trying to brush the moment away like lint from my sleeve. But it stayed. That evening, I found myself lingering in the hallway outside his room. I told myself I was checking to see if he needed anything. Ice, a snack, a blanket. But really, I just wanted to hear his voice again. I knocked lightly. "Come in." He was lying on his side, a book resting open on his chest, the glow of a lamp casting a warm light over the room. "You okay?" I asked. He sat up a little. "Yeah, just thinking about what you—" The air caught in my throat. I stepped inside, unsure what to do with that answer. "Me? Today? Yesterday?" The way you look at me," he said softly. "I know I'm not imagining it." I hesitated in the doorway. "Jake, I'm not trying to make this weird," he said quickly. "But I need you to know that moment in the bathroom. It wasn't just me being clumsy. It meant something to me, at least." My heart thudded in my chest. I closed the door behind me just to muffle the sound of my own nerves. "I don't know what it meant," I admitted. "But I haven't stopped thinking about it." His voice dropped to a whisper. Me neither. We sat there in silence. Nothing happened, not yet, but something had begun. Something slow, fragile, and deeply unfamiliar. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a woman forgotten. I felt like a woman remembered. The next morning, everything felt sharper. The sun spilled in through the kitchen window, brighter than usual. The air smelled like toast and citrus, and my nerves were wound up like a watch spring. I couldn't stop thinking about what Jake had said the night before, how he looked at me, the weight of his words, the truth in his voice. And the worst part? I hadn't wanted to stop thinking about it. I had spent years convincing myself that certain lines were never meant to be crossed. That love had an expiration date after a certain age. That attraction, especially one so unexpected, was just a flicker of loneliness disguising itself as something more. But now I wasn't so sure. I heard the soft thump of Jake's crutches as he moved down the hallway. I was pouring orange juice when he stepped into the kitchen, still shirtless, the waistband of his flannel pants hanging just low enough to make me look away faster than I wanted to. He smiled gently. "You were up early, but so are you," I replied, my voice too light, too careful. He leaned against the counter, looking at me like he could see right through all my walls. "Didn't sleep much." I nodded. "Me neither." We stood there, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence between us. I could feel his eyes on me, but I couldn't meet them just yet. "Can we talk?" he asked. I sighed softly. "I think we already did?" No," he said, taking a small step forward. We danced around it. "I need to know if you felt it too." There it was. No more pretending, no more dodging. I turned to face him fully. "Jake, I did. And it scared me." He nodded slowly, taking in my words. "Why?" Because I'm older. Because I'm your mother's cousin. Because people would judge it. Because I've spent my whole life putting up fences to protect myself, and this is like a wildfire burning through all of them." He stepped closer. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. I wanted to stop him. I wanted to tell him that this couldn't happen, that we were just confusing comfort for connection. But the look in his eyes, the quiet tenderness, the respect, the restraint kept me frozen. "I'm not trying to rush you," he said, reading the hesitation in my face, "but I can't pretend anymore. I look at you and see more than just Lisa's cousin. I see someone who listens, who cares, who makes me feel like I'm not just a patient in recovery." I looked down, blinking fast. "I don't know what to do with this." "You don't have to do anything," he said gently. Just don't shut the door yet." Later that afternoon, we sat on the back patio, the sun dipping low behind the trees. I brought out a pitcher of iced tea, and we didn't talk for a long while. Just sat together side by side in that quiet intimacy that doesn't need to be filled with words. After a while, he said, "You know, when I was a kid, I always thought you were the coolest grown-up. You weren't like my mom or teachers. You talked to me like I mattered, like I was worth listening to." I smiled softly. "You were. I think that stayed with me," he said, "even when I got older." I didn't know what to say to that. I just reached over and lightly touched his arm, and he didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. He looked at me like that one small gesture meant more than it should have. That night, after he went to bed, I sat alone in the living room and let the silence wrap around me. I thought about how long it had been since someone saw me without needing anything from me, since someone had made me feel like the prize. Not as a mother, not as a caregiver, not as a woman past her supposed prime, just me. And that realization made me cry, not out of sadness, but out of something deeper, recognition of who I used to be, of who I might still be. I didn't know where any of this was going, but for the first time in a long time, I wanted to find out. The following morning arrived wrapped in soft light and quiet nerves. I stood at the kitchen sink, hands resting on the edge, watching dew slide down the window pane. My heart was full, confused, alive, unsettled, but full. I had no blueprint for this, no guide to tell me how a 52-year-old woman should feel when a much younger man, her cousin's son no less, sees her for who she really is. Not just with admiration, but something gentler, something dangerously close to affection. I heard the shuffle of Jake's crutches behind me before he spoke. "A morning," he said quietly. I turned. "A morning." His hair was still damp from the shower. He wore a simple gray t-shirt that hugged his chest just enough to make me notice. He leaned on the counter just across from me, his expression unreadable. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice steady but soft, "about what this is, about us." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Me too," and he asked, "I don't know what's right, Jake. I've spent most of my adult life doing what made sense, what was expected. But this doesn't fit in a box. It's complicated." He took a step closer. But is it wrong? That question settled in my chest like a stone. It wasn't easy to answer. I thought about Lisa, about the family, the whispers that would follow if anyone ever found out. But I also thought about how long it had been since someone made me feel curious about life again. No, I said at last. It's not wrong, but it is delicate. Jake nodded. Then let's be careful with it. No rushing, no labels, just honesty. That word, honesty, anchored me. He held out his hand. I looked at it for a long second before slipping mine into his. It felt warm, grounding, not a leap, just a step. That afternoon, we sat outside again, the spring air humming with life. I asked him about his classes, his music, the things he wanted after recovery. He asked about my dreams, if I still had any. I used to want to run a bookstore, I said with a laugh. The kind with creaky floors and mismatched chairs where people linger too long. He smiled. That sounds perfect. You should still do it. I met his gaze. Maybe I will. Something in me was changing, gently, quietly, but completely. This wasn't a fantasy or a mistake or a secret I needed to bury. It was a moment of my life that felt real. That reminded me I wasn't finished growing or loving or being loved in return. That evening, just before the sun dipped behind the hills, Jake joined me in the hallway as I folded fresh towels. His hand grazed mine as I passed him one. Our eyes met, and for a second I thought he was going to kiss me, but he didn't. Instead, he leaned his forehead lightly against mine. I like who I am when I'm around you, he whispered. I closed my eyes. I like who I'm becoming. We didn't need more than that. Not that night. The next morning, Lisa texted me to say their flight was delayed and they'd be back late. Jake and I had one more quiet date together. Nothing happened, not in the way someone might expect, but everything did happen. And as I packed my bags that evening and we said our goodbye, we didn't make any grand promises. Just a lingering look, a brush of hands, a shared truth. Driving home, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel regret. I felt away, not because of what did or didn't happen, but because someone reminded me that I still mattered, that I could still be seen, still be wanted, still be part of something real. So if you're listening to this and wondering whether it's too late for you, let me tell you, it isn't.